at the time, I couldn't prioritize the kids. I knew they were important too, but I had to sacrifice. And so I believed all of these things. That's what would make me successful. That's the key. And so what I did not realize until later in my career, that those are all myths. Those are all myths.
Caring for others is part of your life, but it's not all of it. This is your space for growth, confidence, and connection to the whole you. Welcome to the DaliTalks Podcast. Welcome back to the DaliTalks Podcast. My guest today is Analisa Quiroz-Wolf, who is an executive coach with over 20 years of experience coaching CEOs and C-suite leaders to expand their impact through equity-centered leadership. She is also an adjunct professor at NYU Wagner and serves on the Taylor Morrison board. She's also an Air Force captain and the podcast host of Women of Color Rise and author of Myths of Success, a Woman of Color's Guide to Leadership. Welcome, Analisa. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me, Dali.
Yes, absolutely. I've been so excited about having you on here to share a little bit about yourself with my audience. So let's start with that. Give us a little background of, where did you grow up and how did you end up in the Air Force and what you're doing today?
So I grew up in San Diego, California, the child of Filipina immigrants. My dad became a US citizen because he was in the US Navy. And so he had always talked about going to ROTC. And I said, Dad, you don't even really, why would you recommend that to me? Do you know me? It ended up being one of the best decisions I've ever made. I learned and met the most incredible leaders who modeled for me what true leadership looks like, what it really means to be a family. And even today, as I have cycled through, I went to Stanford, was in the Air Force, went to business school, was in corporate, and then, was in education, starting schools, eventually became CEO of a charter school network. All throughout that, I find that the military is what actually grounded me in what leadership pipelines, family, even meeting you, Dali, as fellow service people. It's just a connection of care. So I love that so much. And I would say that of all the different experiences, the connection to what I do now as an executive coach supporting women leaders of color, I feel like there are principles from the military about what does it mean to be part of a unified mission of service? And then how do we think about our strengths in service of that overall mission is still true today.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing about that. I love the fact that you said your dad was in the Navy, so you're second generation military. That is so cool. That's something I try to get my girls to do, but they weren't having it because I'm the first one to into the military in my family. But yeah, and then that now you're working with CEOs and corporate America, which is a whole different world. It can be so intimidating, especially as a woman of color. So, tell me a little bit about what type of challenges you've seen with the women that you've been coaching that they have to face or that they're dealing with right now in corporate America.
So, Jolly, one of the reasons I focus on women of color is one, I'm a woman of color, but two, I know what it's like, whether it's in the military, corporate, or nonprofit, to lead as a woman of color. I'll speak specifically about being CEO. I thought that given my strong technical background and my experiences, I'd been, leading for over 20 years, the job actually was doable. It was, of course, jobs are hard, but the job itself was doable. I found that as a woman of color, I found myself asking this question. I wonder if they would be treating me like this or talking to me like this if I weren't a woman of color. And what I realized later is that I wish I had had supports like an executive coach, like a community of other women leaders of color, so that I could help normalize these experiences I was having. And then also learn from each other, from research about how can we effectively deal with practices that, frankly, I know this is your work, but felt like bullying. Pretty sure you wouldn't be talking to me like that if I were a white man.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for that reason that my mission for Women of Color Rise is support women leaders of color. We can do the job, we can be CEO, but the path to getting there is difficult. And when you're actually at the top level, there are new challenges that we wouldn't have expected given our path, because we're a woman of color.
Yeah, so do you see a correlation with the challenges that women face as officers in the military versus corporate America?
I mean, I would say across military, corporate America, and then even nonprofit,
Hmm.
when people see us, they don't automatically think, oh, she's a leader.
Hmm.
At least I'm a 5'2" Asian American. It's not the stereotype, right, of what a general in the military looks like, or a CEO of a corporation looks like, a nonprofit CEO. So we have the stereotype, first of all, the non stereotype of being a leader. And then there are the stereotypes of being, well, you're in the background. As a woman, you should be of service. Why would you be negotiating for a higher salary? Why would you be advocating for yourself for a promotion? Why do you care about power? Why are you talking like that as if you're so confident? Why do you push things so forward? Like, at the same time, why aren't you owning all of the work? Isn't that what you're supposed to do behind the scenes? So we have all these competing perspectives that are thrown upon us, and we're still expected to operate. I got this
Yeah.
feedback, Dolly, that said, "Oh, Annalisa, you are, you're nice. You're such a nice leader, but I'm not sure if you're tough enough." And what does that mean? Like, give me evidence about me not being tough. Well, I just think that it's not personal. I really like you, but they're the decisions you're making. They're just not tough. You need to make tougher calls, with no real evidence. I said, well, give me examples so I can be better. There was no concrete example. So that's a common thing I help with leaders of color who are in my portfolio. They come in with, imposter syndrome, wondering if they can I actually be a C-suite or a CEO? What will it take when I'm dealing with microaggressions? How do I advocate for myself without people thinking that I'm selfish or bitchy? It's like you can't have all of it, right? You can't be both kind and also a tough. Like, it's just not possible, but you can.
Yeah, absolutely. You said something about them telling you like you're not tough enough. And I think that, well, at least in my experience with the military, I think that there's a different definition for them when they use the word tough. What they mean is sometimes more aggressive or more violent even. And I was a drill sergeant, so I remember noticing they wanted me to do things that I would never do to anyone. Like it was just cruel and physically abusive. And even as a sergeant, I remember they would kind of be really upset because I wasn't shouting and demeaning people all the time. And it's almost like they translate that type of leadership style as the correct leadership style to show toughness. So my question is, do you think that in the corporate world that might also be the problem, or is it possibly defined a little different?
In corporate, I found that it was business focused. Why would you put your emotions? Why are we talking so much about the personal feelings? Like, let's get the work done, let's get the numbers up. And for that reason, I felt like there was to be successful, to be a leader, was to be tough, to be business numbers focused, not soft. Anything soft, anything personal was seen as weak. So that same connection, I think, military wise, it's so interesting because you would think in the military it's all about being tough, but I actually found that the military was probably the most personal of all the different experiences I've had, because it was like, Dali, how are you? How's your kids? Did you solve that bullying problem? Like, what can I do to help? How's the garden going? How's your mom? It was that kind of question. I was like so confused because I thought that that would be the way it would continue to be in corporate or nonprofit, but it wasn't. So polar opposite. So while it's antithetical to what the military reputation would be, you can actually be very, very personal in the military. I mean, I know I'm talking about 5 years of experience, but I found it to be so caring, so family oriented. So, I mean, I'm still friends with these people today, and that's like 25 plus years later.
Yeah, I agree because I experienced both. There was like the rough part, but then you also still do have that camaraderie, which is really beautiful. And I assume that in the corporate world, you have the same thing. So, what are some of the what you often talk about equity-centered leadership? Can you break down like what that means in real world terms, and also tell us like why is it essential in for organizations today to not just be nice but to have?
So, equity centered leadership is about understanding how each person can shine.
Hmm.
And as a leader, you're looking at the people that you lead and saying, what would it take so that I can help all people, whether of different backgrounds, experiences, race, demographics, they will have an opportunity to be able to give to the organization and also thrive. So it's an important way of bringing bottom line results, because often we might think equity. Equity means not being able to. It's a distraction, right? But actually, it's about when we let everyone give their gifts, then you actually get better results. So I love the equity centered leadership because it's also personalized for me. It's the reason I was successful. Had I mean, the reason I believe I am where I am is because I had leaders who led in an equity centered way and then got to know me, understand what I could deliver for the organization. I had a Colonel Schieffer. He met me and he said, "Wow, you're really good at communicating and being able to project manage and think strategically. Let's leverage those skills so that we can have more dynamic presentations for our consulting projects." And there I found myself in front of generals, incredibly high ranked leaders because of Colonel Schieffer allowing me to share this talent with the Air Force. And I think that's what equity centered leadership is how can I get to know you and your gifts and help you know that we appreciate you and we want to help you grow in your career. So let's continue to give those gifts. So it's a win-win for both the individual and the organization.
Do you think that there's a lot of emphasis on mentoring in the corporate world?
I mean, I want to be general with all corporations. I would say that from my experience, I had to find my own mentorships myself. And I remember I had a mentor who was, the innovation head at this Fortune 200 company. And her name is Mary. And she was so different from the company culture, right? The company culture was like suits, and Mary would be, thinking in suits and kind of, we follow the company rule. And Mary was always looking at ruled trends and saying, "Hey, Annalisa, did you see what's happening in Japan? Come on this tour. We're going to check out uh, the the art in Brooklyn. We're going to do a graffiti tour to see what trend." I mean, it was so cool. And Mary was someone that I really admired and became my mentor. And fast forward, Dali, 15 years, and she is still my mentor. Like, we talk about the business, she gives me feedback. She was the one who prompted the book that I wrote. She said, "Why don't you write a book? This is important for us to capture. Here's how you need to improve your podcast." I mean, she gives really straight feedback to me. But that mentorship developed because I was looking for a mentor and also because she offered her mentorship. I think it's a two-way street, but not normally a practice that all businesses are going to say, "Oh, yes, we have a mentorship program." You've got to take it that initiative yourself.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I asked that question because, there's been a lot of talk the last 15 years maybe about the importance of mentorship. And I always wonder how does that play in corporate America versus the military versus other institutions? Because I, of course, have made it a point to try to mentor people who are willing to take the mentorship because you also don't want to invest your time on somebody who's not willing to participate and to also put the things that you recommend into action, which is one
Mhm.
thing I must say for listeners. Like, if you do have a mentor, please don't waste their time. Just, you
Oh my
know,
gosh.
yeah, because you're doing this for free, right? You're doing it because of the passion that you have, because you see potential in people. And then it's really disheartening when you're mentoring somebody and then they just listen and they say, and then they don't do it. And then they wonder why they're still stuck. But you mentioned this person, Mary, or
Hmm.
yeah. So Mary helped you with your book, right? So
Yeah.
this is wonderful. That's very, very special. So tell us a little bit about your book.
So I was inspired with Mary's prompting to write a book called The Myths of Success, A Woman of Color's Guide to Leadership. Dali, I don't know what it was like for you growing up and the work world, but I thought it was about working hard, keeping my head down, not being greedy, not asking for anything, just doing a good job. I knew networking was important, but it was so busy. And it was about, as moms, like we were not about, I mean, at the time, I couldn't prioritize the kids. I knew they were important too, but I had to sacrifice. And so I believed all of these things. That's what would make me successful. That's the key. And so what I did not realize until later in my career that those are all myths. Those are all myths. And the reality is that it's not about hard work. We want to do a good job, of course, but we have to make sure that we're maintaining relationships, that we're having mentorships, that especially sponsorships. I remember specifically, I I was working nights, weekends. I had a newborn at home, and I had taken on not just one role, but as effective women, we often get more work, right? And I got this additional role. A person had left and said, my boss said, "Hey, there's this additional work. Can you take it on?" Which meant to me, well, of course, I'll take it on. I'm going to run this program plus my job. I have a newborn at home, but I'm not going to, I'm not going to mention that. I'm just going to continue to sacrifice. So here I am working, 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 and I'm doing this for 6 months and no changes in terms of salary or title. And it comes promotion time. And I'm thinking to myself, Dolly, I got this nailed. I mean, I did these jobs, I did them well, I didn't complain. This is my time. This is my time to shine. And so I had my family book dinner. I was like, this is going to be a celebratory dinner. We got to go celebrate. I can't wait. And so promotions came and they announced, here's who's promoted. And my name was not called. And I was so sad. And I believe I cried because I couldn't believe it. I went to my boss and it was a big deal. I even went to him and I said, I just don't understand why I didn't get that role. And he said, "Oh, I had actually forgotten that you took on that additional work. And your name didn't come up when people were talking about, who the stars were. I know you're a hard worker, but I didn't even really know that you wanted a promotion. You seemed happy. I, my bad." And I was like, "What?
Wow.
You seem happy?" Like, you never complain. You seem good. So I learned my lesson. You got to ask. And people might say, "Oh, you're so selfish." But no, how will they know if you don't even ask? So I always ask. I always make sure that I prioritize my family. People will have judgments about it, but I'm not playing that game. I'm not playing that game.
Yeah. Oh, Annalisa, what you just shared is so resonates with me because I did the same thing in the military. I would tell myself no before somebody would tell me no to a certain point until like I learned my lesson. And I learned my lesson through a mentor because he was just like, "What are you doing? Why aren't you, and you're like knock some sense into me." But I think maybe it is a cultural thing that we grow up like believing, yeah, do the hard work, bow your head
Mhm.
down, just keep working, and somebody will recognize you and reward you for it. And then you realize, wait a minute, I need to speak up. I need to share, my ambitions, but also I've heard be careful who you share those ambitions with. And so far for me, it's been a positive, but I know that there are some moments where sometimes sharing certain goals with the wrong person, depending on the atmosphere of the workforce, it can be stifling. But anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. But I want to talk about your podcast, Women of Color Rise. You've interviewed many powerhouse women. I've enjoyed your podcast so much. So, what patterns or traits do you see among women of color who successfully rise up to the leadership positions, especially when they start off really young?
I want to share that when I was growing up in the work world, I didn't see people who looked like me, who were my bosses, and certainly not in the C-suite or CEO world. And there came a point later in my career where I said, I want to work for a woman CEO, a woman of color CEO, a diverse leader. I live in New York City, and you'd think, Dali, there's so many, right? There's such a diverse city. There's lots of organizations. There's got to be one where I can do mission oriented work for a leader, a diverse leader. I gotta tell you, Dali, I talked to a lot of people, and I can count the number of people they recommended on one hand. It was so sad. And I eventually ended up working for someone who was a white leader, white man, said because he was talking about equity. And I thought, okay, well, if not to work for a diverse leader, at least someone who's talking about equity. And I bring this up because that was the impetus for this podcast, is that I wanted people who could share their stories and answer the question, where are the women leaders of color? There's so many. And I know you are on this podcast too, who are doing wonderful work, who can be models for other leaders of color to say, yes, me too, I can do that. When you ask the question about shared stories, there's so many commonalities. I used to think, Dali, oh, it must be just me. Must be just me who got passed over. Must be just me who didn't do the right thing, wasn't good enough. And the reality is that we share so much. I'll share three things that we tend to have in common. One is this doubt, self-doubt. Who am I to aspire to be a CEO? I coach a lot of women leaders of color, and almost none say, I want to be CEO. That was never their dream. They just wanted to change the world, right? We want to like do good for the world, share our gifts, help. It's never CEO. And I think one did. They're like, I want to be a leader. It's like, wow. My daughter also, she wants to be president of the United States and a soccer player and a doctor and a teacher. She wants to be a lot of things. But that's not a normal thing on this podcast. Most people didn't aspire to be one, and that includes myself. So that's the first thing. We don't aspire to do it. Two, because of the self-doubt. Imposter syndrome is real. People don't look like us, so we wonder, who am I? If anything, we'll be the COO. I'll be the behind the scenes. I don't need the spotlight. So let me be the COO who can help others, because it's greedy, which leads me to the third one, which is I don't want to be selfish. So I don't want to negotiate for myself. I don't want to negotiate for bigger roles. That seems greedy. Why would I network? It's all about myself. I don't want to do that. I want to help others. So it's like you just, it all feeds into ourselves. We just want to help. We just want to be behind the scenes. We don't want it to be about us. But I'll tell you, if we really wanted to change the world, one of the most effective ways to do that is to actually take power. It's the reason that I became CEO. I never wanted to do that. Even when I was looking for roles, I said, where is the CEO I could work for? To be COO, right? I fell into exactly the thing that all these other women had fallen into. And it was not until I talked to a white man, his name's Paul. He said, Annalisa, I'm happy to help you find COO roles, but I don't understand why you're not looking for CEO roles. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, you have, I recruit for CEOs and you have a ton of experience. Why would you do another COO role? You've been doing COO roles for the last 5 years. And I thought to myself, I don't know. I'd never thought about it. He's like, well, you're obviously very well positioned. You have a ton of experience. People would be lucky to have you. You should look. And it wasn't until someone said that to me that I had even considered it. I got this role only because someone said I was going to be a consultant, and then they offered me the CEO role. And I said, wow, wasn't looking for one and was offered to me. And so that's how it happened. But I took it because I thought to myself, if I really want to do the work also includes being a face and looking like the way we do, that leaders look like us. They are women leaders of color, and we can be good leaders. So it was a bigger call, right? If I truly want to serve the movement, yes, it also means that I take positions of power.
Ooh, Anna Lisa, you just said so much. First of all, I want to say thank you for having me on your podcast because the quality of women that are on that podcast, I was like, wow, she's got like these amazing people, and she's asking me to come on the podcast. This is so cool. Which brings me to what you said about CEO and pursuing that. I remember when I began this business, I was asked, and this was at like a small business development center where we were writing our, business plan and all. And they asked us, what title do you want? And then how many of you want CEO? And I was like, oh no, I'm not CEO quality, and I felt like CEO had to be, earned by going to corporate America and being, in that position for several years just to qualify. And then, now after almost 8 years of doing this business, now people ask me, are you the CEO? I'm like, yes, I am. I'm the CEO of my business. I know what I'm doing. I've been running it for 8 years. But it's crazy how it had to just sit there for a while until it felt comfortable. So and I know I'm not the only one. That was like a hard realization. And I remember asking myself, why does it bother me? Why does it feel scary and uncomfortable? This is crazy because I'm doing the work, and well, especially after, I've been doing the work for several years. So thank you for touching on that because I want people to understand that sometimes we devalue the things that we know and our abilities and our knowledge. And it's just crazy that all of the great leaders still kind of question themselves, especially women. That's one of the things that I hear a lot of your podcast guests talk about. And when I hear it, I'm just in disbelief because I'm like, what? But you just say you did this and this, and how could you? And so then I ask myself, like, oh, I'm not the only, I tell myself, I'm not the only one. And it kind of makes me feel a little bit better, but it also reminds me that I too need to just shed that mentality to get out of my own way. And Annalisa, you also mentioned Paul, a white man who helped you get to that CEO position. I find that this is a misconception that men don't help others come up the ranks, whether it's in the military or in corporate America. And the more I hear like the interviews that you've done and in your own story and mine, I remember all of the mentors that I had were men.
Mm,
And well, for me, there were Black or Latino men. But like you were just saying, Paul is a white man who helped you. And so, speaking on myths, are there any other myths that you would want a young woman going into corporate America know so that they can stay out of their own way with those myths?
yeah. Let's go to networking because
Good one.
networking first feels like an add-on.
Yeah.
Dolly, I have so much. I have 2 kids at home, barely holding my job together, and this economy is crazy. I've got to make sure that I focus on my job. That's where I'm going to keep myself, my family safe. That's what we mostly hear, right? But the reality is that we have to maintain the relationships. That's actually what's going to keep us safer. There's no such thing as safe. There's no such thing as guarantee of job security, especially nowadays. But to help us, we've got to maintain our relationships. And it's not transactional. People often think, oh, well, I'm just talking to Dali because Dali's going to get me on our podcast. Actually, you and I met through a person, like a shared colleague, Carlos, who's wonderful. And we have a lot of mission connection about wanting to serve, being mothers, being veterans in the military. And it's this connection that I hope that we'll be in community together. I can support you. You can maybe support me. You can support Carlos. That's what we're talking about. Because we think sometimes, and I grew up with this belief, oh, well, I want to be strong. So that means I've got to be by myself. I got to prove that I'm strong. And that's being tough is by myself. But actually, to connect with you, Dolly, we're stronger. People of color as women helping each other, we're stronger. So I would say that counter to popular belief and myth that you got to be focused on your job and do it solo. It's actually a place of strength. You can learn actually from our white male peers that they build networks. They build networks from school age through college that continues with them. My husband came home and said, "Hey, there's an investment opportunity. It's this company, blah, blah, blah." And then he closed with, "It's a high school buddy." So I trust that this is going to be a good investment.
Mhm.
And that's why we decided to invest. And yes, it's a good company, a good idea, but it's through those relationships where you put your hard-earned money to back someone that will actually place the deal, recommend the person. That's how people get jobs. So stop with this myth that, I don't have time for networking, and actually lean into it, because they're not just like, oh, transactional things. They're real relationships that we can help each other.
Yeah, I'm so glad you touched on networking because that's something that I definitely struggled with. I think I'm better at it now, but it took a while because my fear was of always being the taker and or asking for something and not feeling like I could give anything of value to them. And it took several conversations with some amazing people who said, Dali, you have to stop, devaluing what you can offer somebody else. And the reminder that when you network with really good people, they'll offer to help you with no expectation for you to give something back. Like they can,
Mhm.
ask for a favor later. And it's really powerful. I'm so glad that you touched on that. Now, regarding other things that you do, you're also a board member, right? An AI board member. Can you tell us a little bit about? I find that so fascinating because we're in this world of AI. So, how do you see artificial intelligence influencing leadership, equity, and decision making within the next decade or so?
What a doozy of a question, Dolly. So I have the honor of supporting an AI company that measures or tries to look at organizational connections. So let me take you to what that means. When I was CEO, I was trying to help the organizational culture. It was tough. It was COVID. People were feeling a lot of things: fear, sadness, worry, anxiety. And and I also knew that people were unhappy. We did a pulse check, right? The true organization systems for culture. You do staff surveys, you do pulse checks, you try to do some conversations with people, but you really can't spot, where is the organization in terms of like, how are they feeling right now? And so this AI company will actually map, looking at how people are communicating, to say who's engaged, who's not, how's behavior changing, is the sentiment more positive or negative, what's going on in the world, and it allows you to see connections. Also sees when people are highly connected, and so maybe there's talent that you're not even noticing. And so I appreciate this company because it tries to take data, which is all public data. None of it's like, oh, I'm going to go and look in your secret note pile. No, it's just a company data, and just says, how can we help our people? In the military, you might know, Dolly, there continues to be like suicide, right? And just how can we help prevent that? And so you can use these types of AI systems to say, hey, look, Jamie is having a hard time, might want to check in on him, right? Versus waiting. And then there's like terrible news. So I want to answer this question about AI and how I think it will change leadership. I think it's a people job. It's a relationship job. It's a trust job. Yes, there's technical aspects, vision and strategy and organizational effectiveness and accountability. There's that too. But as a leader, you want people to be able to trust and connect with you and be maybe inspired, but hopefully want to know that they can believe in you and what the organization represents. So given that, what is AI's role in this relationship job? I think that there's ability for leaders to better understand their people, to maybe say, what is the organizational culture? How can I support my people given my own background? How can I show up authentically? how can I leverage people connections instead of like being a robot? I worry sometimes with all the remote culture that it's like we've missed out on the people connections because it's emails back and forth, especially if it's all AI generated. So I think that it can help if you're mindful of it. Say, as a CEO, my culture is having a hard time. Can you help me understand specific teams where I can lean in more, bright spots that can help, amplify? How can I, are there people who are not engaged? How can I help with that? How can I better show up as a leader to inspire confidence and trust? And if we can use AI tools like the one that the startup that I'm supporting as a board member, wonderful. But let's not let it take the role of a leader. And all of a sudden, there's like a robot in front of us.
No, I completely agree. And I was just having a conversation about that with my child who wants to go into the sciences. And she says, I just don't want to use AI. And I said, that's kind of crazy that you want to go into the sciences, which requires AI for a lot of things now. But, you still need that human touch, that human element that I don't think it can be replaced by AI. Hopefully not. But yeah, the connections are so, so important. And Annalisa, for if you were to think of any cultural experiences that you've had or anything about your culture that has helped you in your career, what would you say that is?
Mm. Well, I'm a proud Filipino American. I have to say, I didn't always say that. I wouldn't have led with that. And I'm proud that I lead. I think that was actually the way I led even my first response to your question, which is I'm Filipino American. Here's my upbringing. And when I share this response, Dali, I'm talking about yours too. Be proud of where you come from. When I was born in the States, but what I learned from my parents was not from them telling me, but from what I saw them, you know, favoring, like the white TV shows and not having me learn Tagalog and telling me that, they were happy I had white friends, we're moving to white neighborhoods, saying it was a better school because it was a white school. So they didn't explicitly tell me that being Filipino was not good, but and I was surrounded by culture that said white was better. And I'm really proud that I was able to learn about, because I went to the Philippines myself. I did a Fulbright there after the Air Force, and I spent a year at my dad's house. I interviewed my family. I went to school at the university there, and I understood better why my parents sacrificed so much to move to the States. There's not a lot of opportunity there, not great schools. I also spent time with my kids there a couple years ago, learning about my mom's upbringing. And she did a tour of her neighborhood and we got to learn about her upbringing. And then last year, I went to the Philippines to learn about indigenous spirituality, our culture. And there's so much before the Spaniards came. The Spaniards came for about 300 years. Before the Spaniards came, there was a lot of beautiful spirituality, community oriented connection to the land, love of ancestors, and it still lives on today. There's still communities. So I was able to go and visit um, an incredible scholar who has connections to communities and got to see the communities actually solve problems through this like connection to land and spirit. It was like amazing. And I'm taking my family, my mom and my two kids to the Philippines on a trip next summer. I'm helping plan it so that they can experience for themselves the connection to our land, our roots. So I'm excited about that. So they can also be proud of being Filipino.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I can relate to sometimes rejecting part of who you are when you're young because these ideas are inculcated into you because for whatever reason. But it's nice to see that you've embraced it. And the most beautiful part to me is that when you embrace it and the introduction that you did, I'm a proud Filipina. There's a young kid or maybe an adult listening and who is Filipina, and she might be like, oh my gosh, she just said it loud and proud. I will too, because that still happens. So thank you so much for doing that. And not just Filipinos, but other people from other countries. Because I
Mhm.
remember I was bullied so bad when I was in school that I wanted to reject anything to do with certain aspects of my culture from Nicaragua because they thought it was like too country and ghetto or inappropriate or whatever. And then you know better later, So thank you for sharing that. And finally, how can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your coaching and grab your book?
You can go to www.annalisawolf.com. You can also find me on Instagram, Annalisa Wolf, and on Facebook and LinkedIn. The book, The Myths of Success, A Woman of Color's Guide to Leadership, is on Amazon. And the podcast, Women of Color Rise, is on all the different platforms, similar to yours, Dali. And lastly, if there's a free chapter of the book that you can get on my website, would love for you to get that.
Yes, and please, people, leave a review on the podcast and for her book, even if you just read the chapter. I gotta remind people because we often forget. Annalisa, this has been so wonderful speaking to you and learning more about, your background. Thank you so much for making time to share your story with us.
Thank you, Dolly. Appreciate you.
Hey, did you like that episode? I have an ask. Would you mind leaving me a review? It would really help me improve this podcast so that you can come back and keep listening. Also, don't forget to check me out at DaliTalks.com and follow me on social media at DaliTalks. Until next time.